To kick off the forum, I'd like to invite here to the podium Mr. Andrei Geica, partner of Sporos Platform and president of the Athens Circular Forum. Mr. Geica, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luciana. So, good afternoon, and thank you to everyone for joining us in the second Athens Circular Forum. It is my absolute pleasure to be here and to welcome you all. And I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank all those who have made this event possible, despite the difficult circumstances. What I want to talk to you about today is about the actual possibility of achieving a zero pollution world, since this is also the topic of the EU Green Week. Most people, when they think about climate change, they think about global warming, but they are not one and the same thing. So before we begin the series of highly relevant and topic discussions over the course of the next 2 days, I would like to invite you on a historic journey over the next 30 years. The year is 2025. It is now the hottest year in almost 150 years of record keeping. The average global temperature for this year surpasses 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the goal of the Paris Agreement, serving as a stark reminder that there is much left to be done. Temperatures in Athens reach 48 degrees in June. The Acropolis is closed for tourists. Extreme droughts force all of Rome's numerous fountains to be closed. There are more deaths from heat waves in Europe this year than all the other natural disasters combined. Dozens die in raging forest fires from Portugal to Greece. In the developing world, there are no guarantees that the planted crops will be harvested, and the World Health Organization is stretched thin. Governments make pledges and announcements, but fail to agree on how to pay for all of it and how the burden should be distributed. Some of them fail to take difficult decisions, like the closing of coal power plants, while others take too drastic policy reversals that are uncoordinated with their neighbors, causing market disruptions. The year is 2028. The ESG bubble bursts after exponential growth, causing a financial meltdown. Too many VC funds greenwash their investment strategies without the necessary expertise and deep understanding of these issues to back their pledges. Those who criticize the EU taxonomy for sustainable investments were right. Market players had difficulty and unwillingness to adhere to it, using loopholes, differentiated interpretations across member states, and safe haven jurisdictions to avoid it as much as possible. Companies lose faith in the private sector for their financing needs. The public sector is not able to step in. Due to the financial crisis and the economic downturn, they have no fiscal space following the historic borrowing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Banks, already risk adverse since the last major crash of 2008, are even less willing and less capable to invest in risky business strategies to sustainability. The greening of the economy in 2028 is falling behind. The year is 2030. 2 million square kilometers have burnt around the world. That's a 400% increase to the fires a decade earlier in 2020. 6 billion animals died, devastating ecosystems. Tropical storms form in the Atlantic, causing around 15 billion in damages each time they hit. The EU is now in constant crisis management mode, directing increasing funds to mitigate these effects. The pledges of governments and business sectors alike fall short. Late action and lack of coordination among countries make the EU Green Deal to underdeliver. The necessary innovation in startups and traditional companies alike, due to the financial crisis, but also due to wrong regulatory incentives, have led to the farm-to-fork strategy to impose too much on the agricultural sector without the necessary support. Food prices go up across the board. For the same underlying reasons, the European Court of Auditors is telling the European Parliament that the implementation of the Biodiversity Strategy 2030 has been a failure. This also led to a lack of supply of alternative fuels because to switch takes time, investment, technology, and a strong policy push, which a fragmented EU was not able to deliver. In the aviation industry alone, only 0.01% of the fuel used are from sustainable sources, as opposed to the 5.5% target. CO2 emissions are only increasing. The very limited supply of alternative fuel creates high competition among different transport sectors due to high targets imposed on them. In the past decade, companies have promoted environmental concerns mostly as an advertising gimmick, and consumers have caught on. This lack of adequate political and technological leadership from the EU, and due to the disappointment that the EU Green Deal has become, the world is slow to follow. Reaching net zero carbon neutrality is now all but an impossibility, and the planet passes the point of no return. The year is 2040. Mega droughts are everywhere. Food shortages plague the entire planet. Prolonged droughts and famine lead to conflict that displaces 16 million people in East Africa alone. The great climate migratory flows begin. Massive deforestations caused by the bark beetle in Europe, who expand its territory due to the warm climate, have all but nullified the reforestation and carbon offset efforts. As heat waves are now the new normal, and with increasingly rapid urbanization due to displaced populations, the demand for refrigeration increases exponentially, which increases energy needs. Renewable energy sources have indeed increased due to lower cost and greater efficiency, but political instability caused by these situations have translated into trade tensions. Renewable energy grids and electrified transport systems rely heavily on lithium, which is 90% controlled by China, who uses it as a leverage for other resources. In order to avoid frequent blackouts, Western countries reintroduce reliance on fossil fuels, since it is easier to obtain and more reliable, in the name of diversification. The dream of the green transition is all but dead. The year is 2050. Every weather channel now has air quality prominently displayed to see if you need special breathing masks to go outside. The ice of the Arctic Sea now exists only in pictures and videos. Coastal cities have suffered enormous infrastructure destruction. With less ice to reflect the light from the sun, permafrost in Siberia is all but melted, releasing ancient viruses that humans have no immunity for. Global pandemics are now expected once in a decade instead of once in a century. Storms and heat waves overlap. Increased humidity in the air is now causing frequent and extreme hurricanes and flooding. Every month, millions of people are on the move. There is no day that goes by when you do not turn on the TV and see in the news that someone, somewhere, had to leave their houses to go to higher ground to escape the rising sea levels. Diseases like cholera, malaria, dengue fever, and malnutrition are everywhere in the world. Tap water is either locked or purchased. All of this leads to civil unrest, wars, and bloodshed. All countries militarize their borders to protect what they have, choking international trade and causing unspeakable human rights violations. Every day there is news about genocide, slave trading, refugees, and suicides. And the one thing that everybody talks about constantly is if this is the last chapter of the human race. This is the shape of things to come if everything stays the same. But it doesn't need to be so. Let me take you back to 2025. It is now the hottest year in almost 150 years of record keeping. The average global temperatures for this year surpassed the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement, serving as a stark reminder that there is much left to be done. But European and global leaders are pushed by stakeholder action, by the growing relevance of the environment for political sensitivities, especially among the young voters, and by the economic growth that came with the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, to do even more. The recipe established 5 years earlier, blending the green and digital transition, has fully started to bear fruit. So much so that in the EU, the US, Japan, and China, this is now the firm basis of their industrial strategies. The year is 2030. The EU Green Deal has mobilized 1 trillion euros in the past decade. 500 billion euros from the EU budget introducing green horizontal objectives like climate resilience and circular economy in the cohesion funds, the agricultural funds, the European Regional Development Fund, Horizon Europe for Research, and the LIFE funds. This means that all those who applied for funding between 2021 and 2027 had to demonstrate that they would be using this money to contribute in some manner to these green transition objectives. Connected to this are the co-investments from national governments, which reached 114 billion euros over the same time frame. Then there were the 25 billion euros coming from the EU emission trading system, which now included sectors like shipping for the first time. And this money went into the innovation and modernization funds, money used specifically by low-income member states. Then there was the just transition mechanism, which mobilized at least 100 billion euros in investments to support workers and regions most impacted by the transition. And the EU budget was also used as a guarantee for the EIB group to leverage around 280 billion euros for higher risk projects. On top of all this, the EIB doubled its climate targets from 25% to 50%, which totaled another 1 trillion euros of investments. And the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which was financed for the first time ever by European public debt, a monumental moment in the European project, laid down the blueprint for a permanent European public sector layer, which brought with it a necessary solidarity and concessions in financial policy, as well as greater coordination among member states than ever before. Due to this unprecedented shift in public investment policy, EU lawmakers were encouraged to amend any shortcomings of the EU taxonomy in its efficiency and implementation consistency, which made it the gold standard across the world. This meant that VC funds, with their reporting and transparency obligations, had to adapt to this new environment accordingly and extend a hand in collaboration so as to gain the necessary expertise to enact their new green goals. Together with public sector advising services, this blended expertise from VC sector of sound management, growth, and sustainability spread across the economic system to startups and SMEs alike, bringing about the technological and societal know-how to meet the 1.5-degree target. The year is 2050. The ITER fusion reactor evolved into the demo power plant as the first fusion commercial power plant to harness unlimited, sustainable, clean energy starting from the mid-2030s. The work conducted in this mega project spawned numerous private initiatives that made fusion energy final reality almost 100 years after its first theoretical concepts. Fusion is the missing component to allow all the other renewable sources to function without an over-reliance on batteries, guaranteeing affordable, clean, limitless energy for the entire planet, putting an end once and for all to the reliance on fossil fuels. Large offshore wind farms produce the hydrogen needed for fusion power plants and hydrogen fuel cells and liquid hydrogen to be used in modifying combustion engines. The transport sector is now a mix of electric and hydrogen vehicles, from electric bikes and cars to liquid hydrogen cars and hydrogen cells for long-haul trucks, trains, and ships. The EU was right to bet on hydrogen in the early 2020s for true sustainable energy diversification. The wide development and use of AI and machine learning enabled the shipping and the aviation sector to transition to net zero by firstly optimizing operations to reduce emissions until the technology investments were made for clean fuels. Planes in the sky are unrecognizable after Airbus delivered its blended wing body design in the mid-2030s, also a hydrogen-powered aircraft. The economy is by now completely circular. Enormous advances were made both in mechanical recycling, where bio-based plastics can be recycled infinitely into high-quality recycled material that can be used in anything, from cars and plane parts to 3D printing. Similarly, the chemical recycling industry is now the second component of a completely circular economy, where new plastic polymers can be created with atomic precision and can be broken down at molecular level using breakpoints engineered into the molecular structure. Being bio-based, they also do not form microplastics, so they can biodegrade in the environment, even if there is absolutely no economic incentive to not capture their material back in the loop. We are now in a carbon neutral world. The enormous coordination effort that was required to achieve this globally ushered in a new golden age for multilateralism, setting the foundation for further international collaboration for a regenerative economy, building carbon capture public utilities and restoring damaged ecosystems, allowing an industrial symbiosis between economic activity and natural environment. All this might seem like hyperbole, but all the scenarios are based on real data, real achievements, real research, real initiatives, and real headlines. History is not an accident. So the fact that we need to accept is that the 21st century is the most important century in human history. And that is because for the first time since the dawn of civilization, our entire species faces a single existential threat. So the choices that we make, each and every one of us, as a politician, as a policymaker, as a business, as a consumer, as a citizen, in the first half of the 21st century, will determine how we answer to this question, by letting it happen or by seeing the enormous opportunity in front of us. In 2019, during the first Athens Circular Forum, and thank you for all those watching who joined us during those pre-pandemic days, our main message to all stakeholders was to connect the dots, to collaborate and sustain each other, because a cross-sectorial transition requires a cross-sectorial approach. We at Sporos managed to do our part, both internally and in our external relations, and we partnered with some of the most active players in Greece involved in the green transition from multiple sectors, so that we can all benefit from this and show you over the course of the next few days how all this can be done. So I really do hope that you have a wonderful viewing experience, and that at the end of the Athens Circular Forum, in your minds, it will be clear what choices you have to make. Thank you very much for your attention.